Why is it sometimes so easy for us to forget Jesus in the middle of ministry? We get caught up in the doing of ministry and don't spend time with Jesus himself, the vine. On this episode of Student Ministry Connection, Candice Wynn joins us to talk about staying connected with Jesus and also about her brand new ministry. Welcome to Student Ministry Connection, a podcast for those who serve in student ministry but also want to connect with others and grow as disciples and leaders. My name is Steve Cullum, and I've served in student ministry since 1999. And on top of serving as a youth pastor myself, I'm also a missionary with National Network of Youth Ministries, where I get to personally encourage, professionally equip, and spiritually strengthen youth leaders for faithful and effective ministry with the next generation. In my almost 25 years of ministry, I can definitely look back and see times when I was just going through the motions. Times when I was doing a lot of work for God, but not really connecting with Him. Maybe you found yourself in a similar position from time to time, or maybe you're there right now. In just a bit, I'll talk with my friend Candice Wynn about why we need to stay connected to Jesus, the vine, and what's worked for her over the years. We also talk about her brand new ministry called BOON, which is strategically serving children and youth ministry leaders in Black churches. But before we jump into that conversation, I want to remind you about GLS Next Gen on August 8th through 9th, 2024. NNYM and GLS are so excited about the strategic partnership to offer a ton of extra resources that will enhance GLS for Next Gen leaders and student leaders. Head over to nnym.org/GLS to learn more and also get your ticket. You'll get access to all the regular GLS content plus a lot more for only $99, what would normally cost you over $200. And on top of that, we're giving away a free ticket. To sign up, simply head over to bit.ly/GLS2024 ticket to enter before July 23rd, 2024. You can also find that link in the podcast show notes. And I also want to take a moment to thank the sponsor of this episode. Ministry can be complicated to navigate, especially when you're juggling multiple jobs, roles, or youth ministry gatherings. Student Ministry Connection believes that the best leaders are healthy leaders, leaders who are able to lead from a place of abundance rather than exhaustion. And that's why we believe in G-Shade's youth ministry curriculum. With the release of Season 6, G-Shades is your simple solution for a gospel-centered youth ministry. Here's what's included. You can simplify your ministry with a comprehensive annual teaching curriculum and ministry strategy. Season 6 includes a year's worth of volunteer training resources, parent training resources, outreach events, discipleship events, and even 2 camps. You can clarify your students' faith with G-Shade's gospel-centered teaching strategy. Their curriculum is laser-focused on helping students see themselves, God, and others through the lens of the gospel. And it shows up in every topic, series, and week. And you can amplify your reach with G-Shade's qualitative and engaging video messages. Whether it's sharing the videos with your digital audience, giving parents a full preview of the content beforehand, or sending them out the next day to catch students up who missed out. G-Shades allows you to extend your ministry's reach, and that's not to mention the benefits of your students hearing the gospel preached from different voices and perspectives. There are lots of great youth ministry curriculums out there, but G-Shades sets itself apart because of a strong focus on the gospel. I've been so impressed with Mike and his team as they've created an amazing gospel-centered curriculum. So head over to gshades.org to catch your first glimpse of G-Shades Season 6 with a 4-week free trial. And when it's time to buy, you can use the offer code CONNECTION for 10% off their top-tier curriculum. G-Shades, seeing life through the lens of the gospel. You can find the link to G-Shades in our podcast show notes. Candice, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. And, all the work that you are doing with all the different networks and communities that you're connected with, I truly admire just
Oh,
watching the things that you're doing. So thanks for the invitation.
well, thank you. Yeah, we've gotten to know each other a little bit over the years and everything, but I feel like You know, I've never actually just asked you your story as much. I mean, I've heard a little bit here and there. So for my
Yeah.
sake, but also the podcast audience sake, I'd love to for you to share as much as your story as you want to share today. How'd you meet Jesus? How'd you get started in ministry, and how'd you get to where you are today?
Yeah, that's a good question, and it's a I guess with most people, it's an evolution of a journey, an evolution of understanding and discerning. I first felt called to ministry when I was 9 years old. I remember sitting in church with my mother, and the pastor was opening the doors of the church, inviting people to come to receive salvation, to join the church, special prayer, all of that, and I remember starting to feel just uneasy, like butterflies in my stomach, and I leaned over and I say to my mother, "Mom, can you take me to the front?" And she looks at me like, "For what? You're already saved, you're already a member, what do you wanna come to the front for?" And I was just like, "I don't know, I just wanna go." So she grabs my hand, I remember, and we walked towards the front, and as we're walking towards the front, I remember feeling those butterflies seeping out of me
Mhm.
and feeling like, "Yes, this is the decision you need to make." And we get to the front, and the pastor leans over and exchanges several whispers with my mother and never says anything to me, but I remember feeling his heavy hand just fall on my head, and he starts
Yeah.
praying for me, aloud in front of the entire church. And then after his amen, I turned and started walking back to my seat. And as I'm walking back to my seat, I felt like those butterflies that escaped me started coming back up inside of me. And I felt like my childhood faith was inadequate and didn't allow
Mhm.
me to receive whatever that was supposed to have happened at the altar. But I was too embarrassed to say, "Hey, no, there's something more." I felt like I missed it, because I was a pastor, right?
Mhm.
So I just continue, allowing myself to just sit on that feeling and eventually kind of fizzles out a little bit. But then again, when I was I guess I was probably around my junior, senior year in college. I went to college in Tallahassee, Florida, at Florida A&M University. And I was in my junior, senior year in college, and I started feeling that same feeling again. And I was able to
Mhm.
connect, like, man, this is that same feeling that I felt when I was a kid. And my more mature faith led me to just understand, hey, God is calling you to do something. I didn't really know what, but God is calling you to do something.
Mhm.
So I started just exploring it with my pastor, and my pastor's wife was also in ministry. They were co-pastoring a church, and we just developed a beautiful relationship. And they just started guiding me through the feelings that I was having, and through that, I understood that God was calling me to ministry. And at the time, I was studying psychology to be a child psychologist because my childhood dream was to be a pediatrician because I wanted to heal children.
Mhm.
And as a child, who do you think heals children? You think of a doctor.
Yeah.
And so when I discovered the world of psychology in high school, I decided to go into psychology. So here I am at FAMU studying psychology and preparing to graduate. And I'm like, God, but God is calling me to something different. And I discovered the world of youth ministry. And here I am, I don't know how many years later, but it wasn't yesterday, just still walking in the world of youth ministry. And it has been a beautiful thing watching how God has helped me to discern God's voice within my life in the way that I've just learned to just understand God and experience God and to help others to do the same. And then
Mhm.
also the evolution of my calling, my desire to heal children from
Mhm.
as basic as a child thinks
Yeah.
through a pediatrician,
Mhm.
and to now working with those who do the work of working with local youth ministries. It's a God thing. It's not a Candace
Yeah.
thing, and I'm very clear about that.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, sometimes people do like are called by God to go a completely different direction, but so many times I hear stories like yours as well that there was something there at a young age, and maybe you weren't able to completely discern it there, but He was placing the next generation on your heart, even as a young child, and being able to set you up on that path to eventually go. That's so cool to see God's hand at work all the way through.
Yeah. Yep,
That's
it
cool.
really is, it really is. I could
Yeah.
probably elaborate on some of that, but I'll just stick with that. It's a conversation for a different day.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure, like, child psychology has probably played a huge role in your roles in ministry and working with the next generation. I know studying some with counseling and psychology myself, like, I had no idea how much it was gonna play into what I did with youth ministry. Have I'm guessing you've probably seen the same thing with yours as well?
Oh, absolutely. So I never got licensed or trained or anything like that when, I mean, what just beside from the academy, just studying it in school. I never took a route towards any kind of licensing or anything like that, but just through the research that we had to read and do the things that we had to be learned in school, absolutely, undoubtedly plays a huge role from just understanding different language and then just the way people think and then just the behaviors of even just the, sociology aspect of it too, of just how people operate within community,
Mm.
and things like that. Yeah, it has absolutely played a major role in the
Yeah.
ways that I've even just hear people when it comes to my years of youth ministry, and then the ways that I work together with families too. Yeah.
That's cool. So one of your big roles right now is with Orange, and it's really how we got connected originally. So
Yeah.
what do you do with Orange, and what's that look like on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I joined the team over at Orange at 2019. In 2019, this was after, I guess at that point, about 13, 14 years serving within the local church. I served in churches throughout Atlanta, then I moved down to South Florida, then came back up to Atlanta again. But so my work in Orange is an technically the title is an Orange student specialist. But what that pretty much means is that anytime someone purchases the curriculum, they're automatically assigned an Orange specialist. And that's just a ministry coaching consultant that comes alongside them and is a resource to use along with their curriculum. So my conversations really, I mean, it's they span from people asking questions like, "Hey, I can't find this in the curriculum. Where is it?" to all the way to, "Hey, I wanna implement small groups in my church, and I don't know how to do this. Can we meet every other month and make that happen?"
Mm.
So our conversations really, really just it's a huge span of what people wanna talk about. Sometimes I have no idea what people are gonna say or what they're gonna wanna talk about. So it's just one of those, "All right, Lord," and I do believe that my all of my years of just life in ministry has come together to equip me to do the work that I do because I love sitting on Zoom talking to people. Some people are like, "I hate Zoom." I love Zoom because I love seeing people. I love seeing people's reactions. I love engaging in conversation. It just provides a bit more of a personal connection, I feel like. So my days are spent talking with people and hearing their stories and hearing their experiences and helping them to maximize the ways that God wants to use them within their local churches.
That's cool. And you came in at just the right time when we all moved to Zoom the year after you started.
Yeah, I say that. I'm like, listen, that was a perfect like that first year was a perfect like baptism into the organization. And then at the end of that first year, my first year, we literally jumped into everything is virtual.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And
yep.
they're coming to you and saying, help me do youth
Right.
ministry online." And you're probably like, "I've never done this either."
Never did it. And I remember, I recently found some old videos of my children when during those years of COVID, and my kids were much younger. So my kids, early elementary, my son was in kindergarten, my daughter was not even in pre-K when COVID first hit. And I would just have them either sit my daughter probably sitting on my lap in a Zoom call, or my son running around the background. It's just, hey, this is real life. But people in youth ministry, they get it.
Yeah.
So
That's awesome.
yeah.
Well, I had you come on. We had recently finished up an online book club, speaking of online, and we went through this book by Alan Fandling. And Alan was on the podcast several months ago, and we engaged in this huge book club, and we had different people come on and kind of close us out with what God's been laying on your heart. And we had you come on for our very last one, and I know as soon as you started talking about what you shared that day, it was like, oh, now I know what we're going to talk about on the podcast. As that was just, it struck a chord, and I think it's going to strike a chord with a lot of youth leaders that are listening today as well. So you talked about how we need to remain connected with God, specifically like divine imagery. So what is that all about, and why is it so important for us as youth leaders to remain connected to divine?
It's a remarkable question. And then, and I think, there's so many different angles to this, but I'll just take this one angle. Um, Maybe something more might come out as we're talking naturally, but I think the most essential one is and this is not to bash anybody. I'm not bashing anybody because I understand the place in which, many of us live when it comes to operating in ministry. But it is very easy, and I'm speaking from personal experience here. So this is not again, not a bash. It is very easy to serve in any sort of next gen ministry and not remain a student yourself. Because if you think about it, hey, those you are serving will likely not know as much about the Bible, God, faith, religion as you, the adult. And especially if you, do it over the years, it's easy not to constantly sharpen those tools within your toolbox, and to just become okay and complacent with the things that you already know because you, to a great degree, your knowledge is ahead of what the teenagers or the kids in your ministry have. So it's easy to not remain a student and not continue to study. I remember after I graduated seminary, I moved down to South Florida and I was so nervous. We used to do Bible study at that time. We didn't do like a weekly youth worship. We would have worship on Sundays for the kids, but we would do Bible study for the youth. And I remember being really, really nervous to lead Bible study for my teenagers. And I was talking to my one of my spiritual mothers, and I was just saying, I'm so nervous to lead this Bible study. I'm so nervous. And she's like, "What are you nervous for?" And I'm like, "I'm just scared about the questions that they're gonna ask." And she's like, "The questions that they're gonna ask are not the same kind of conversations that you're having within that you had within your seminary classroom." And I was like, "Oh, man," because I felt like, hey, I felt completely even though I graduated seminary, I felt completely ill-equipped to lead a conversation. But then I realized that, hey, my baseline knowledge with having gone through seminary and been a student was just so far ahead of what some of the students who are there that were within the ministries that I led, that it was easy to just not continue studying,
Mm,
and it's easy to just do the work of God without necessarily really spending time with God about what to do. And as people become these specialists of, I understand youth ministry and I know how ministry operates and I know how ministry is run, but yet the reality is, the things that God wants to do in our ministries come with new revelations. Yeah, there's nothing new under the sun. I get it, but there is a way for us to not become so caught up in doing the same thing year after year, teenage cohort after teenage cohort that comes through your ministry. And I think that those things can only happen if we remain connected to the vine and we connected to the source. When you think about that word abide that's there in John 15, like what does it really mean to abide? What does it really mean to remain connected? And what does it require of us to remain connected? So I mean the origin of that is really just from being a part of communities, intimate conversations with people and hearing about how people just really struggle. And I think it's way more common than what people wanna admit,
mm.
it's way more common than also just my personal experience of just growing complacent and not allowing myself to continue to sharpen the tools that God has given me.
Yeah, when I think of this, I can't remember who originally said it, but I was at a conference one time, and it just smacked me in the face when I first heard it. That I think those of us in ministry, and it goes way beyond youth ministry, but I think a lot of times we get caught up in doing work for God rather than with God.
Mhm. Absolutely, absolutely. Because and you think about all the things that have to get done, right? And many
Mm,
people say, and it's not uncommon for people to say, "Hey, youth ministry is a church within a church." Yeah, it's a church within a church, right? But when you think about the larger church where the adults go, and the pastor and the staff that the pastor potentially has, or even the volunteer leads that they have, they typically have someone over music, they have someone over hospitality, have someone over finance, they have someone over maybe media and production, things like that. And some of these people might be volunteers, but they're committed to a higher and a greater degree of service than which sometimes you might experience within a youth ministry. And so the youth pastor's role or responsibility is to essentially duplicate that to some degree. Not necessarily saying that every church has gotta have a production team, hospitality for this or youth ministry, but you some of those aspects are things that you need,
mhm.
just to make people feel welcome, within your youth ministry. And when you think about the task that is on the plate, it's easy to just fall into what is my checklist for this week? What are the things that have got to get done? Let me just check it off, check it off, check it off, but not allowing ourselves to really, okay, let's pause.
Mm,
Like I give you just a quick example. Right before I hopped on here, I started really just feeling really, really fatigued, like really, really fatigued. And I felt like my body was saying, close your eyes for a second, right? But I was like, but I need to my to-do list is this. I've got to knock out this. I've got to knock out
Mm,
that right before I get on this call. It in and but I what I decided to do, I was like, "Okay, I need to really listen to my body, because sometimes I don't know that we necessarily do a good job of listening to our bodies. We ignore the feelings that we feel when God might be giving us a, "Hey, pause. Hey, slow down. Hey, stop for a second," because we see the task list that's in
mm,
front of us. But if we believe in God to be the orchestrator of everything, right? The creator of everything, time included, then not even realizing that same God who created time has the ability to control time, but we're
mm,
afraid to trust God sometimes with that controlling time. So we just like, hey, now I've got to knock out this, and that, and I'm just going to keep on pushing through and completely ignoring the feelings that our body might be giving us to kind of, hey, slow down, stop, spend some time with me. Like the little
mm,
whispers that God is giving us to just tap in to the source, the ultimate source that's within us in order to equip and fulfill those tasks, right? And not realizing that God gives us has a potential to give us even the greater ability to be more productive with
mm,
those tasks if we are obedient to the voices and those subtle whispers that we might be hearing and feeling.
That's so good. And it reminds me of some of the things that I feel like God's been teaching me over the last few years as well. Like, and it's so simple, but he wants to hang out with his children. He wants to be with us.
That's
But
right.
how many times we're
Yeah.
like, "Oh, hold on, God, I got too many things to do for you.
I'll
I
come
got
back
too
in
many
one
lessons to
second, right?
plan. I've got all these other things, and I'll,
Yeah.
I'll I'll be right back." And he's just
Like,
like,
do you not
I
realize what you called me to, God?
yeah, exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like, "Hey, come back. Like, I want to just be with you." Yeah.
Yeah.
So what works for you? I know everybody's different, but how do you remain connected to the vine?
Yeah, and you know what? For me, it's been an evolution over the years. The same way my calling has evolved. I think the way that ways that looks has evolved over the years. Before I had kids, I would wake up early in the morning and I would spend some time with God before my day got going. And then I'm like, after I started having kids, I was like, man, I'm just way too tired in the morning.
Mm,
No, because they've had me up all night, you know. So no, that's not happening. So a lot of times for me, it might look like it's a midday, like a midday selah, a midday break, just stopping and pausing and reflecting a little bit. For me, also, one of the things I mean, I like reading, so I read a lot of different books. I feel like books are a great tool and avenue that kind of help to give me some sort of inspiration or feel connected to God. But it really depends upon what I feel like I might be needing at the moment. I'm trying to do a better job of being attentive to my body and responding to the needs that my body is telling me that I have at the moment, right? So maybe there might be a moment to just stop and just close my eyes like I did before I hopped on here.
mm,
Maybe it might be a moment to just, hey, I really need a fill up. But then there's moments when I'm like, no, I need to listen, and I don't look at me stopping and closing my eyes and like resting as a listening moment. I look at it as like a pause and a stopping moment. So then there might be times when I need to actively listen. And the ways that I actively listen to God just look different based on how I might be feeling, honestly. So yeah, but I will say this though, one of the things that I am in the process of navigating through right now is a conversation I'm having with someone who has been guiding me spiritually over the past, many years, is just understanding, hey, what is the source of my inspiration? How do I feel the most connected to God? So that's a question that I have been actively trying to answer. So I don't know that I've ever really answered it. Like the things that really make me feel the most connected. I like reading the Bible, but I don't necessarily think that reading the Bible for me is a thing that makes me feel connected to God. I feel like
mm,
those are stories that of people's lives and ways that God has shown years ago, and not to say that they're not powerful, but I believe that God is still powerful today.
mm.
And for me, I think I need to see evidence of God's power today in order to feel the most connected. Somebody might get mad at me about that, but
No,
it's true.
I think it's great, and I think yeah, I mean, if you take that out of context, of course, like that would be like,
Yeah.
"What is she saying?" But I think within the context of what you're saying, I think is huge because and I know I'm guilty of this. I've taught teenagers, "Hey, it's okay to like you don't have to do your daily quiet time like this every day and everything." But at the same time, like then I turn around and I give myself a hard time if I miss a day of, reading the Bible,
Yeah.
or I miss a day this, or whatever. But when I hear you saying it's okay to change it up. It's okay to, like,
It
God
is.
wants to meet you in different ways, and day to day it may change, season to season it may change, and
Mhm.
give yourself that flexibility, because God is not in this little box that we often put him in. Like, well, we have to read the Bible for X amount of time, we have to pray for this amount of time, and that's how we meet with God, and that's it.
Yep. Absolutely. And so, for me, and this is probably, and this might be the answer to that, but and it could be one of those things where, hey, life is just so different for me now. I don't really spend as much time doing this, but I know art for me is a huge piece.
Mm,
So there might be a word that I get stuck on from something that I might have read, or a song that I might have heard, that just a word or a phrase or something that just really just sticks with me, or maybe even through a conversation. And I will write that word down and just draw around it, or get a
mm,
canvas and write it on the canvas and just paint around it. And for me, that's a holy space and a holy time for
mm,
me. Art is definitely a time where I feel most connected to God, and it's a way that I feel like I have learned to experience God the most. Yeah, so I probably just answered my question that I've been trying to navigate through. Yeah, I think I just have, because I haven't done it in so long because of just
mm.
life. Life happens.
Yeah.
And so, yeah. Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same way. I think one of the things I love living here in Colorado, and just being in the mountains is something that I can just be in awe of the majesty of God's creation in that time. And I don't have to be reading. I mean, I'm in kind of
Mhm.
a casual conversation of prayer, with God as I'm hiking
Yeah.
or skiing or whatever. But yeah, I'm the same way though. Like, it's one of my favorite things to do to connect with God, and I can't remember the last time I did it. So
Right.
yeah.
'Cause of life, but it's so
Mhm.
important to just reconnect with those things. So this is my personal account, using this moment to hold myself accountable, So within the next week, I'm gonna have to do a little something.
Yeah,
Yep.
there
I
you
like
go.
getting in my garage, blasting music, pulling out some canvases or some spray paint or something.
That's
Yeah,
awesome. That's awesome.
I
Well,
need
if
to
you
do it.
share them, if you're okay with sharing them, you should share them with us. We'll post them on our Instagram as well,
Yeah,
and
I'm
see
gonna
some of
have
your
to do
work.
that. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep,
that'd
yep,
be
yep.
cool.
Gotcha.
Yeah. One of the other things I heard you say is that you have some people that they're speaking into your life and being those spiritual mentors and stuff as well. How important has that been as you're continuing to grow as a disciple, to have those people constantly speaking into your life, rather than you always pouring out into these other youth leaders, these students, and everything else?
One word, essential. I think the people that God has placed in my life hold me accountable, and they hold me up. They remind me of who I am when I forget. They see things in me that I don't always see in myself. They help to really just motivate me and challenge me to not remain complacent. One thing that I think is so essential as we all journey through our personal life with God, and especially as we support teenagers through it. You see a lot of teenagers who decide to take their relationship with God really seriously, and all of a sudden they decide to, I'm going to get rid of all of my quote unquote bad advice friends, and I'm going to read the Bible every day for an hour. I'm going to pray for an hour every morning. They put in all these practices in their lives that are just like,
Mhm.
I don't know if that's realistic.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important for us to encourage teenagers to pace themselves, but also think it's important for us to pace ourselves too,
Mm,
right? And to not do too much too soon, and to really just, hey, how do you make sure that you're continue to grow in your relationship with God, but also don't try to take on too much too soon,
mm,
right? So they are the ones who hold me accountable, who I feel like I can be 100% honest about where I am in life. And they let me know, hey, you're doing too much. Or they'll say, hey, you have been here a long time. Grace is abounding right here, and we're gonna love you
mm,
while you're right here. But just know that, here is not where you're supposed to be forever.
mm,
So it's a beautiful thing to have people who that you can be authentically yourself with, who know all about you. And I mean, there's one person who I've been walking with since I was about 20, 21 years old. She's never met my husband. Never.
mm,
She's met my daughter. My daughter was an infant when she met her. My daughter's about to be 8 now. Never met my son, but she's one who knows all about them
mm,
because of just she started out as my counselor, and our relationship has just evolved from being a counselor therapist to what it is now, more of the spiritual lane. And she's someone who I can be honest with. And I think it's important for us, especially those who are in ministry and leadership positions, to have people who we can be honest with and who can be honest with us. So,
Mm,
yep.
mm. That's good. That's good. Well, Candace, I know you've given our listeners, you've given me enough to chew on today. I'm sure that our listeners are thinking about some ways that they can really remain connected to the divine, I think, as well. And like you said, it's so important. I mean, if we're called to this ministry and we have an impact on the next generation, like what are we going to be able to give them if we're not also connected to God as well? So thank you for all that. I want to turn our attention to another organization that you started up. So, Student Ministry Connection is all about connecting youth leaders. And I also get to do that with the work that I do with NNYM, which is why I was so excited to hear about your project that just really intrigued me. So, tell us a little more about BOON.
Yeah. So BOON is our acronym for Born Out of Necessity. And it is a national network for Black churches and leaders. And one of the things that I've seen just from working at Orange and being a part of a lot of different organizations is just a lack of diversity that exists within a lot of youth ministry serving organizations, whether it be through staffing in these organizations or through those who are connected to the organizations. You go to these conferences and the I mean, like, the diversity rating is, you know,
Yeah.
and just growing weary of being one of very few people of color, who are either speaking there, who are on the team working within the organization or attending conferences. So this is an organization that I started that is a direct response to some of those things. So we serve Black churches and leaders, and our goal, our mission is to provide community, inclusive community strategy, our culturally responsive ministry strategy, and opportunities for an amplified influence. So we launched June of 2023. So 1 year ago officially,
Mm,
and we are celebrating our first birthday. And it has been a beautiful thing just watching what God is doing within the network. We have a monthly podcast that we talk about different topics relating to ministry. And through our conversation, it's just innately Black church conversation because we're Black next gen thought leaders talking Black next gen ministry.
mm,
And we provide people opportunities to hop on Zoom and just dive in a bit deeper. We've got a closed Facebook group, for those within the community and the network, and we provide different opportunities. We're in the process of we're building up to roll out our speakers bureau and our staffing agency that'll go live in September. We're depending upon when this episode comes out, we'll be either gearing into or we'll be right in the middle of a 6 CD listening tour where we're just traveling. We're going to be in Atlanta, Birmingham, Houston, Inglewood, Chicago, and DC, where we're just hearing from leaders in those cities to just hear their challenges, their successes, their experiences in ministry, so that we can be better advocates on the national level of what Black church next gen ministries need. So that I'm really excited about all that God is doing. God has provided some amazing opportunities and space for us to just really just pour back into Black church next gen
mm.
ministries.
That's really cool. So like a lot of people, I think we've been learning a lot about diversity, especially over the last several years, which I think is something that's way overdue. But as I think about the different ways that the body of Christ really should look like, we really should be more diverse, we should be more connected and everything. So what are some ways that we can be more of an advocate for this?
Yeah, I'd say that one of my greatest challenges is around the term best practice.
Hmm.
And I do think that there are certain things that are just good practices to have, but yet best practice promotes a universal standard and it assumes some sort of a universal experience.
Mm,
And I think that it's while it is best practice to have background checks, absolutely. Right, that's just a best
mhm,
practice. There are some best practices or some strategies that I've seen different organizations or things promote that are just not always universally easy or just universally possible or
mm.
feasible, because of just different ways that the history of our nation has. I'm trying not to dive in too deep here, but the
Sure.
way that the history of our nation has permitted things over the years, right?
Yeah.
And so the way in the way things that it has created. So many churches, this standard or the quote unquote best practice might need to look different. And I
Mm,
feel like there's a whole line of best practices that are more they're diverse churches or black churches. I'm speaking uniquely for black churches because I can't say what other, churches of other ethnicities need. But I would say that there's a whole line of best practices that black churches need that has been ignored
mm,
by mainline organizations who are saying that these are best practices.
mm,
So a huge part of our listening tour that we're doing is to, hey, it's to really just nail down and drill it and say, hey, when people say we need something different, let's figure out what those
mm,
things might be that people need. Another thing that you and other people can do is just promoting opportunities. So one of the reasons why we're building out a staffing agency in our speakers bureau is because a lot of people are saying, we can't find black leaders who are doing this.
mm,
We can't find people doing that. So we're lowering that bar. We're not allowing that to be an obstacle anymore by providing easy opportunities for organizations and churches to find more diverse voices. So just promoting opportunities for people who don't necessarily look like you. And then just supporting not just BOON, but other organizations who are doing the work to try to make ministry in lifelong ministry within next gen space more attainable for different leaders who might be serving in contexts that are different than yours.
mm. That's really good. Thank you for that. And yeah, thanks for helping those of us that are,
Mhm.
yeah, we're still trying to learn and trying to grow in this area. We got a lot of room to grow. I feel like we've made some headway, but there's still a lot that we can do for sure. So
Yeah.
thanks for leading out in this and helping us in this direction. I know people are going to want to connect with you more. I know they're going to want to find out more about BOON or maybe follow up with some of the stuff that you talked about with remaining connected with God. So what is the best way for people to connect with you more?
Yeah. I mean, for me personally, you can find me on Instagram. I'm the Revcan, Cherevcan. And if you want to learn more about BOON, go to thebooncommunity.com. That's the THE BOON BOON community.com. And you can find out more information to get connected with our network or shoot us a message right through the website.
Well, Candice, thank you so much for being on the podcast. Really appreciate all the work you do with Orange, with BOON. Really excited to see where God takes BOON and this whole initiative. As we've talked about, it's such a need, and really excited to see what God does. And thanks for reminding us that we really need to
Huge.
be connected with the vine. That's such an amazing reminder, and just pray that God will continue to bless all that you're doing.
Thanks, Steve. Thanks for the opportunity to be here. It's always good to talk with you. And kudos to you and the work that you're doing. Truly admire it. Truly admire it.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I pray that you're able to stay connected to the vine or even reconnect to the vine in the days to come. Also, please join me in praying for BOON and all the good work that they are doing. Speaking of praying, be sure to mark your calendars for the week of August 12th, 2024. We at NNYM want you to be a part of a huge prayer initiative for school campuses and juvenile detention facilities. You can find out more about the ways that you can participate at the link in the show notes. And if you'd like to support my ministry with NNYM, you can become a financial partner and a prayer partner. Just head over to nnym.org/Steve Cullum or follow the link in the podcast show notes. Thanks again to G Shades for sponsoring this episode. Head over to gshades.org to check out the latest season of their curriculum, and be sure to use the promo code CONNECTION for 10% off your order. And thanks again to you for being here for this episode. If you haven't yet, click that subscribe button on your favorite podcast app or on YouTube, and share this with others you know in student ministries so you and they don't miss out on future episodes. And until next time, be sure to stay connected, and may God bless your ministry.